Could the Bucs make a massive move this offseason and bring in one of the best pass rushers in football? We're going to talk Maxx Crosby, also John Gruden, pushing hard for Jason Licht in the front office in Tampa to make this move. We're going to give our thoughts on it. How realistic actually is it? Maxx Crosby to the Bucs. Also, too, Baker Mayfield just got a big-time hire on his end with a quarterbacks coach coming in that I think a lot of us here are very positive on. A national champion coach who just helped win a Heisman Trophy for Fernando Mendoza. And also, too, we got to recap the Pro Bowl games we saw last night. Antoine Winfield Jr. winning defensive MVP there. And of course, to finish it off, we got to talk about this Lightning game that was absolutely insanity in Raymond James Stadium. I know a lot of our listeners were there or watching, but what a game, possibly the best NHL game this year, if not for a very long while, by far right up there with one of the top outdoor games held in the NHL. But wow, what a busy start to this week. With me this morning is Caleb Skinner, our writer at BucsGameday.com, and River Wells, our lead editor here in Tampa. Gentlemen, good morning. We've had a busy week so far, I must say.
Yeah, it has been busy. There's been a few things going on throughout the football world. We also got the Super Bowl coming right up here on Sunday.
Yeah.
So once that ends, we're fully in the off season, baby. So gotta grind it out, talk about the combine, talk about free agency. But first, a few other things to talk about today as the Bucs continue to fill out their staff. There's a big hire that we're going to talk about today, and then there's also a few more defensive staffers that need to be put in place for the Bucs before they really start getting going on a lot of the other offseason stuff.
Yeah, things are going to start picking up here pretty heavy in the offseason once Super Bowl gets underway. Super excited for it. Going to make some white chicken chili up here in the Northeast. Get nice and warm and cozied up for that one. I'll be honest, I didn't watch the Pro Bowl at all last night.
It was late, man. It was
lost
late.
its luster with me, man. I just can't do it anymore. It's not the
It
same
was fun
as it was with us millennials growing up.
Yeah.
But awesome game. Awesome to see Baker Mayfield, Tristan Wirfs lead out the Tampa Bay Lightning there in Raymond James Stadium in the creamsicle uniforms. So excited to talk about that. One hell of a matchup, but a lot of sports going on and more to come.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, Skinner. I did not really watch much of the Pro Bowl games. I did not watch any. I just was in my bed and saw the highlights come out and just saw Micah Parsons scooting around on the scooter there. And then, of course, with Anton.
They should have let the man play.
Yeah, let him in there, man. They should have like Marshawn Lynch out there. I mean, no one's ever going to be able to replicate whatever. It was back in Cal, but what he did on the scooter there or the cart, just driving around nailing people. I love Marshawn Lynch, but yeah, not the same type of Pro Bowls anymore in this day and age. But let's talk about Maxx Crosby, man, because that's why a lot of people are here. They want to have something to look forward to or something just to even dream about, because it does feel like that is a dream, but there is some linkage here, of course, between the Bucs and Maxx Crosby. So the reason we're bringing this up because John Gruden just recently went on The Drive with T-Crass, a great show that they do here in Tampa, and they had a long interview. And John Gruden brought up some things that he feels like this Buccaneers organization needs to do this offseason in order to take that next step. And he also mentioned the Green Bay Packers and what they did going after a guy like Micah Parsons, who's one of the best in the league and can be an absolute game changer for you off the end. And so here's what he had to say. And he said, yeah, I mean, if you're probably going to make a big play for Max, I think the Buccaneers did take a page out of the Green Bay Packers book. They went out and got Micah Parsons. Perhaps Jason Licht can swing a deal to get a great rusher. He's talking about Crosby here. He's the best player on the team. I think he's arguably the most impactful edge rusher in football. Absolutely. I think that's a winning edge that a great defense has. It's a fourth quarter pass rush. When we got Simeon Rice, things changed for us. He also mentioned too, speaking if you're on the Raiders side here, if you're the Raiders, you're the dumbest franchise in America if you let him out of there. He's under contract and he's the best player on the team, but you have to check the guys that are available. And that's talking about, Jason Light and the Bucs and what could be a big move for them, specifically here with Maxx Crosby. And I'll let you guys speak on it further. But there are ties, of course, with Jason Light and the Raiders GM with John Spytek. Could there be something here with those two having a really strong relationship? Jason, I'm sure helping him push up and get him that GM job with the Raiders, maybe just help one another out here potentially.
I think there are a few things to consider here when you talk about Maxx Crosby. The first is whether or not Jason Light would be down for a huge blockbuster trade. He has done a lot of work in free agency in the Tom Brady era, right? He would go and get anyone Brady wanted, from Leonard Fournette to Antonio Brown to et cetera, et cetera.
Gronk,
Gronk, right, exactly. How would I forget that one? But when it comes to blockbuster trades, not usually something he does. He doesn't like to give up too much capital. I believe Todd Bowles calls it robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? But Crosby's a great player, fantastic pass rusher, one of the biggest pressure generators the league has at that position. And if you're able to field an offer, I think it would make sense, given that the Bucs have a lot of problems developing their own edge rushing talent, to look for the trade market to try and get one. The other big thing that I'll talk about is that Micah Parsons is 26 years old. Maxx Crosby is 29 years old, I believe. So that's a pretty big difference there. In football years, you're getting a little up there, which sounds crazy to say about someone who's 29. But as far as the NFL goes, it's how it goes. So that would be something to figure into whatever trade package you would want to put together for a guy like Maxx Crosby. His age, his contract is fairly large. He was guaranteed about $90 million on his contract. He signed it in 2025. He's played 1 year on it. So he still has a lot of guaranteed money left to go, and that's another thing the Bucs had to consider when bringing him on. So it'll be interesting, because we saw the Parsons trade wasn't huge, I think, for the player that the Packers got. So when it comes to Crosby, who's older, it would be interesting to see what type of package that the Bucs would put together, or what the Raiders would be getting in offered for Crosby. So curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's definitely, you want to go get one of these guys. Obviously, due to the fact that you can't develop, as you mentioned, River,
Right.
Any of the young guys that you get in here, whether via the draft or whatever it may be, they have not worked out. Obviously, we saw last year with Hassan Reddick, that didn't work out. So you need an elite pass rusher to kind of take the edge off a little bit there from Yaya Diaby, trying to do as much as he possibly can on the opposite side. And Max would fit that mold, right? He's an elite pass rusher. Yeah, he's 29 years old, but he's shown that he can still do it. The Spytek, connection with Jason Light is huge. Now, whether or not those two are going to work together to take away one of the best players, or probably the best player on the Las Vegas Raiders, I don't know if that's a possibility. Max is clearly upset with how things have gone over there in Vegas, so he could demand a trade, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen. With that being said, you also have to remember that Crosby did just have surgery on his knee after suffering an injury there at the end of last season. Yeah. So he will be coming off of that. I highly doubt it's going to affect him too much. I mean, he was shooting basketballs at his home gym off one leg before the surgery even happened. So guy is a player. Guy's going to come in, give a motor 24/7. Obviously, you saw him do that in Vegas on a team that didn't win, and this would just elevate that defense even more and give you one of those elite pass rushers that will give your cornerbacks and your secondary a shorter amount of time that they're being asked to cover back there, and which could lead to interceptions, lead to turnovers, so on and so forth. Right. So it'd be a huge get. Now, how realistic, I'm not sure. We do know that Jason, as mentioned by River, does not like to necessarily go out there and pull off a huge blockbuster trade such as this. But if he were to, this is the type of guy you want to be able to go get. Yeah, it's going to probably take a first, a second, two, and maybe a player, some draft capital later in later drafts. On top of that, maybe some fifth rounders thrown in there as well. But it'll take a pretty good haul to get a caliber of player as Maxx Crosby into Tampa Bay. But there's other guys out there that you could possibly get cheaper on the trade market. I mean, you look at a Rashawn Gary, obviously had a huge down year there in Green Bay, but you can kind of look at guys such as that, maybe even an older veteran, even older than Maxx Crosby with what's his name up there in Cincinnati. being able to make a move for
Trey
him,
Hendrickson.
like Trey Hendrickson. So we'll see. You've got to go get a veteran guy who's able to produce. You don't just go get a veteran who doesn't produce. You got to get a guy who produces. You can also do that in the draft, but we'll see what direction they went ahead. I love John's idea of going and swinging big, and the Simeon Rice comparison is huge. I mean, you think about the contract that Simeon got when he first got to Tampa. It wasn't even near what he, was deserved to be paid for his production at that time in football and his career. So obviously Max is under contract already, so you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, it would be huge. It would be a huge get for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if they're able to. How realistic? I'm not sure, but if we're hearing, rumblings, there's at least some sort of thing going on behind the scenes or, under the foundation here that they're calling, possibly reaching out for his availability. But we'll see how it unfolds, as the offseason continues to unfold here after the Super Bowl.
Max loves Vegas. He loves being there. He's a big Raiders guy. He loves that fan base a whole ton, but he is irritated. He's had enough of this, and now you're hitting another reset there. And now, it's expected for Clint Kubiak to be the next head coach there, the Seattle offensive coordinator, who's going to be competing for a Super Bowl this upcoming Sunday. And, you just got to wonder. I mean, they're likely going to go here with Fernando Mendoza as the first overall pick, expected to be that way. And certainly that matches up well with Kubiak, and you feel strongly about what he's been able to do with Sam Darnold in just this year. So if you're Maxx Crosby, you feel optimistic that things can head in the right direction offensively for you, but they still have a lot of work to do. You're going to be relying on a rookie quarterback to come in and change everything for you. They're going to have to make major moves this offseason, both free agency, but also in the NFL draft, because that offense has a lot of work to be done with it. On the defensive side, they lost their defensive coordinator. Maxx Crosby lost his defensive coordinator. He's coming to the Steelers. Like, there's a lot of moving parts happening with the Raiders right now, and I just don't know if saying, hey, Fernando Mendoza's coming in, everything's going to change. I just don't. First of all, I don't think he's a solid, very solid quarterback. Just won the Heisman and everything, great. But I just don't know. It's going to be a long while before the Raiders can get back on track. It's going to take about 3 to 4 years. It's just not going to be just.
We've been saying that for 20.
Yeah, yeah. And I just wonder if Max really, if he wants a Super Bowl, and that's the biggest thing. Sure, he can just ride it out with the Raiders and be a high performing player and be one of the best in the league. But do you want a Super Bowl? And who knows if Tampa even gives you that opportunity with Todd Bowles these last 2 seasons with the defense deteriorating. Like, he does need a pass rusher though. He does need a pass rusher, and that would be a big fix for defense, for Todd Bowles' defense, Caleb.
Yeah, I also think too, like, Maxx Crosby's a personality, and this defense lacks any personality across the board, right? Like, there's nobody who's really going to speak up, demand something. Obviously, Levante David, kind of one of those guys, but as he's gotten older, he's kind of
more of a post game.
So we got to get Jason Pierre-Paul back for a year.
Right? Yeah, get you a guy like that. Get you a guy like a JPP who's going to mouth off, who's going to fire his guys up by telling them how effing trash they are playing on the field, or whatever it may need to happen to be. This is the type of player that you need on that defense. He's an outspoken individual. He's not afraid to speak his mind, as we saw with him getting in former Tampa Bay Buccaneers linebacker Devin White's face during this past season, because of how porous he was playing and allowing, gap plays after gash plays and, touchdowns galore on the Raiders defense. And he had no problem doing that. And that's the type of guy that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need on this defense. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are a few options you could go. Crosby would be a pretty big splash trade, and I think you'd have to give up a lot of capital for him, but obviously the production is there and proven. And, of course, there are some other people you could look at. You mentioned Trey Hendrickson's in free agency. Caleb Logan, you'll know the name Nick Herbig over there in Pittsburgh is kind of the belle of the ball when it comes to trade candidates for edge rusher. So there are a lot of sort of places you could look. But regardless of whether it's Crosby or somebody else, I do think I kind of agree that the Bucs probably need to go and get a veteran edge rusher. He could be productive, and that'd be nice. But, they found Shaq Barrett because Shaq Barrett was behind Von Miller. And they brought him to Tampa Bay, and he immediately lit it up with the franchise sack record. So guys like that. I just mentioned Herbig. Find one of those people that aren't playing as many snaps as perhaps they should, and you could do something there. But I think Diaby's a good second edge rusher that could really do well with a great edge rusher alongside of him. And if they're able to fix that problem with their pass rush, everything else kind of falls right into place. It's the most important thing you can have as a team outside of a great quarterback. So if you can't develop one, you got to bring one in.
Yeah, and that's what they were trying to do with Hassan Reddick this last year, and it just completely fell on its face.
Didn't really work out. Yeah.
It just couldn't stay healthy. Reddick couldn't stay healthy. Everything looked great in training camp and such, and the mentality was there, and things we were hearing throughout the locker room were heading in the right direction. But just when it came down to Sundays, it just wasn't working in that favor. And like you said, for Yaya Diaby, he needs someone out there that's a pure pass rush that can get back there and allow for him to do what he needs to do. It just helps both sides when you have a high caliber of this talent, like a Crosby coming in. But there are other potential. I mean, Crosby's at the top tier right there with like a Trey Hendrickson and such. But it is going to be really intriguing to see what Jason Light is able to do, because he does have that very, very close relationship with Spytek. Those two are very close. Pretty sure he's called like Spytek someone that he could just leave for a while, don't have to really babysit him, and he took care of helping find some of those big time draft picks like a Tristan Wirfs, Winfield Jr., even Yaya Diaby. Like, Spytek did a lot of good work for the Buccaneers, and
probably really one of the big reasons why Tom Brady decided to come as well was his relationship with Spytek. So
yeah. That is true. That is very true. And now I did find on here too, I looked it up earlier, Spytek did not give a full-on yes if Max Crosby is untouchable. So this was back on January 5th when asked about it. All he said was he embodies what a Raider is. So no full yes on if he is untouchable, and that was just last month, almost on the dot. So that's some pretty interesting things there, but maybe the relationship between Jason and Spytek, there could be something worked out here. That some of these trades, they take months and months and months to put together. But, with Jason and Spytek, they know each other very, very well. That could speed up that process as well.
They do.
Something to monitor, but we'll be discussing a whole lot more, too, of some targets that the Bucs will likely be going after, keeping a close eye on.
They need a lot of help on the defense. So
yeah.
They need a lot of help. They need a lot of help. Yeah.
I feel like we felt that way going into the season last year, certainly at linebacker.
We did. We did.
Linebacker. Yeah. We didn't have to speak on it a whole ton when they brought in Hassan Reddick, but we immediately moved. Okay, our eyes went to the second level, and that was at the linebacker position, because you knew what Levante David was, 2 years prior, and it's just the age starts catching up there, and it just wasn't. You needed more help there. You need more help, and I just don't think that was the case. And they tried to make some small moves throughout the offseason in that regard, but just wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and I mean, you just to cap kind of this talk off and everything. I mean, you look at the linebacker level. Devin Lloyd has been a very much floated about name as a target in free agency at that linebacker level for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which he's been fantastic. Kind of up and down career in Jacksonville. His rookie year was fantastic, and then this past year was absolutely fantastic. But those 2 years in between, that he kind of had down years, but they've gotten the most out of him in Jacksonville. Would fit in as an all 3-down linebacker here in Tampa Bay, even if Levante David decides to retire, or if he doesn't decide to retire, he would fit in very well into this defense. And then I see a bunch of comments in here from everybody tuning in. We do appreciate you guys for doing that. Mesidor or Bain from Miami, when you're looking at 2 guys very productive at the University of Miami, making it all the way to the national championship. I'd lean more Mesidor if I were, Jason Light and company and who I'm taking, but are either of those 2 guys going to be around when you're picking at, 15? Not quite sure. And then again, you get back into that developmental phase. So interesting. There's a bunch of different ways that the Buccaneers can go. And then there's other edge rushers and other linebackers that they could target at that 15th overall pick as well, which it's a great year if you're going to go get a linebacker in the NFL draft. So a lot of interesting things. A lot of attention is going to be paid towards this edge rushing position and linebacker for the Bucs for sure.
Linebacker is typically not a luxury position to use a first-round pick on, but my goodness, does this team need one? So we'll see what the philosophy is there. But with Levante David potentially retiring And quite frankly, guys, even if he doesn't retire, would be nice to have another one. And then Servassier Dennis not quite playing the standard last year. They're in a really bad way, I think, with that linebacker room. And it's also, I think, arguably more vital in Todd Bowles' specific defense than maybe it is elsewhere, with how much they're asked to do at the inside linebacker position. Playing that sort of highly coverage-based scheme in a 3-4. We'll see what ends up happening there, but they really got to fix that, and they got to fix the pass rush. So 2 huge areas they have to fix when it comes to the defense, and they're going to have to figure out how they have to allocate their resources and balance them in order to do both of those things this offseason.
100%. Yeah. Linebacker is going to be a big focus here. And we're all keeping an eye on what Levante David and his decision is going to be. And he's been on a few interviews already and, said that, his injuries that he was dealing with last year didn't help, and training his knee on a consistent basis lacked and didn't help his play as much. But at some point, the Bucs need to do what's best for them. And I know that they've said that it's open door. You want to come back, we can do that. But that door can stay open for sure. But the Bucs still need to reload there at the linebacker position. I don't care. It gets to a point to where, yes, this is great. We love you, Levante. You've had an incredible career, but we've got to get some younger guys in here. We got to have better play. And if Todd Bowles is willing to just keep riding that and not make that a big focus this offseason, they're in trouble. They're in big trouble, and you won't see Todd Bowles as the head coach for the Buccaneers in 2027, nor maybe the middle part of the half part of the season. I'll be honest with you. This fan base is not too fond of him coming back for another year.
Oh, so Glaciers have never fired a coach in season, but I guess there's a first time for everything. So
yeah, they won't be too much of a fan whenever the entire Steelers fan base takes over Raymond James Stadium next year, and no Bucs fans are in the stadium. And
that was going to happen anyway, Logan.
That is true. Sadly, unless it's a Lightning game, which we're going to talk about. Lightning, all you need is a hockey game. Then everybody's in Raymond James Stadium and 30 degrees.
Al Davis once said, "Just win, baby." So.
Yep. That's all you got to do. All right, here we go. The Bucs did make a big hire here, and this is one that we were monitoring since really last week. I'd say there was some interest between Chandler Whitmer, the Indiana quarterbacks coach, with them, who coached Fernando Mendoza, of becoming Baker Mayfield's and the Buccaneers quarterbacks coach down here in Tampa. And sure enough, after some talks and some meetings and interviews, he is now going to be right there with Baker, trying to turn some things around and become, their next big coach. Maybe. I mean, a lot of people that have seen a lot of the media talk about him and such. He's a highly touted guy and highly respected across both the collegiate level and the NFL level. Of course, as we know, I mean, they just went 16-0 with Indiana. Fernando Mendoza had a phenomenal year overall from him, expected to be the number 1 overall pick too. But just going back and real quick, listing out a few quarterbacks that he's actually worked with: CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, Justin Herbert over there with the Chargers, Michael Penix Jr. with the Falcons, with Zach Robinson. That's where those ties align with one another last year. And then, of course, like I just mentioned there, with Fernando Mendoza. I bring it to you guys. How big of a hire is this for a guy like Baker? Because I had been predicating really heavily that Baker needs a guy that's specifically a quarterbacks coach that can help him on a week-to-week basis when we're in the season. But he's one that I think can continue to develop and improve his play. This just seems like a really good fit for a guy like Baker and what this offense is going to want to do mutually with Zach Robinson.
Yeah, if you look at Whitmer's resume, it's actually kind of crazy how fast he's risen the NFL ranks. He was at Yale in 2018, Ohio State 2019, and Clemson in 2020 as a graduate assistant for 3 years. Immediately gets promoted to the Chargers offensive quality control coach from there in 2021. And then he's the pass game specialist in Atlanta in 2024. He gets to be the quarterbacks coach and co-offensive coordinator in Indiana last year, and now he's with Tampa Bay. So definitely a really fast riser, and I think his connection to Zach Robinson certainly brought him to Tampa Bay. There were reports that a lot of other NFL teams were inquiring about his services, but he chose the Bucs. makes sense given that he worked for Zach Robinson in 2024 and they have a good working relationship. So definitely good news. And Baker Mayfield has played some pretty good football over the past 3 years at certain points, and then sometimes a different version of him kind of comes out. We saw that the back half of last year with a brutal drop-off. So it might be good to just get another face in the building and kind of switch things up. I think Thad Lewis overall did a pretty good job, but sometimes you just got to shake it up a little bit, and perhaps that's what Whitmer will do with Baker Mayfield. And after developing a guy like Fernando Mendoza, you guys saw Fernando Mendoza when he was at Cal, and that's a game that FSU won 2 years ago. So
what a time to be alive!
Right, taking him from there. You probably didn't watch that game thinking he would be a Heisman Trophy winner the next year, but that's what a guy like Whitmer was able to do with him in Indiana, with the rest of that phenomenal staff. That Indiana football team is probably one of the best college football teams I've ever seen hit the field. So kudos to them and what he was able to do with Fernando Mendoza, and hopefully some of that same magic can come over to Baker Mayfield. We will see how they like working with each other, how they gel, but overall, a pretty good hire, I think.
Yeah. Shout out to Thad Lewis for everything that he was able to do here. First and foremost, that was, one of those guys that was kind of a staple in the coaching staff, and seeing him go was, unfortunate, but, time for a change, as River mentioned. And, I think it's going to be great, for Baker Mayfield. It's going to be, you looked at the quarterbacks he's already worked with, fast riser, young guy, in that tweet right there from Tommy P, talking about he had multiple NFL offers, but decided, he chose Tampa. So that's a great sign, first and foremost, is that he decided to come here to work with Baker Mayfield, work with Zach Robinson again, and then his pedigree and the quarterbacks that he's coached is pretty solid. Although CJ Stroud hasn't necessarily amounted to what we had thought. We saw Trevor Lawrence has begun to take strides in his career. Justin Herbert, obviously, as well, working with Michael Penix before the injury, and then Kirk Cousins too. So he's worked with a ton of quarterbacks, and then you throw in Fernando Mendoza. Now you can question, Fernando Mendoza was in RPO a lot at Indiana, and that we'll see how that translates for him once he's drafted by the Vegas Raiders. But is that necessarily going to be a problem as he's moving over into the NFL? Not necessarily, in my opinion. I think, his history of coaching in the NFL and coaching under Zach Robinson is going to kind of allow him to get away from that a little bit more. So it'll be interesting how he kind of fits in with Zach Robinson, what their ideas are for this offense. Are we going to look at the pistol a little bit more? Are we going to kind of get away from it? But overall, I think it's a great hire. It's going to be great for Baker Mayfield, having two guys in there that he's comfortable with, that he's going to, feel okay bringing up his opinions, his thoughts on things and how they are unfolding on the field throughout the process of a game. So I think it's a huge pickup for the Buccaneers, as you mentioned in your tweet, Logan. And I'm excited to see it come together, excited to see what it looks like in the offseason and training camp and things of that nature. But super stoked. The offense is rounding out to be what we thought it was to start last season. And let's just hope that comes true this year.
Mm-hmm. And, River, you and I got to sit down with Zach Robinson, and we discussed a lot of things.
We did.
And we talked about Baker and, getting him back into that form and that big season, his best season in 2024. And then 2025, things fell apart. And, of course, yes, the injuries were there, but I think it was more predicated on the offense and Grizzard and some lack there of quarterback coaching. I think this should see a really solid jump. And I think, for Whitmer, it's attractive to come coach a guy like Baker. Tom's reporting here, there's a lot of NFL teams with some big interests here in this young coach. And, he decides to go and coach Baker Mayfield. And I think that shows a lot to, with Zach Robinson rejoining there with him and how positive, Zach Robinson's telling Whitmer, like, this guy's, Baker, we can get him back in form, man. We can get him back in form, maybe even more too, as well. And even getting Baker back to 2024, that's all you need. that's all you need. That offense is going to put up points. You're going to get down on the field, with drives and such. Like, that's the good thing. But with Baker, man, who wouldn't want to come and coach that guy with the energy that he plays with? Fernando just recently spoke and called Whitmer the best position coach I've ever been around, talking about the physical part of the game, along with the mental approach to every game on Saturdays. So that says a lot about him as a coach coming in. And I think this is a pretty big addition that Todd Bowles and, this staff was able to go through and grab, and shout out to Zach Robinson here for getting it done.
Yeah, I think it speaks to a lot to how people also view this organization as a whole, despite even, a really down year where there's a lot of, talk and rumors and who knows what going on in the locker room, that a guy was able to choose your team because of how highly people, have spoken about your team, spoken about your front office, spoken about the coaches that are in the building. So when you have a guy that deliberately has any option available to him and he deliberately chooses your team, that speaks, worlds of how highly, people are thinking about joining the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from roster all the way, to the top with the Glazers. So that's just a great sign in my opinion.
Yeah. A comment here on YouTube saying, still nervous about Zach. His Atlanta press conferences sounded similar to his Tampa ones. Can he adapt, or was Atlanta a crap show? So we've only gotten one presser from Zach, and I thought that he did a great job there on that end and presented him as well. He's been used to doing this anyways, but we've talked about it when we had our instant reaction to that presser and our side discussion with him that we had afterward. And, I thought that he did a good job on that. River, Caleb, I mean, you could talk about it a little bit more on the Falcons side. And yes, they did have some talent there, but also some really big injuries, kind of on the same realm of what the Bucs had to deal with, certainly at the offensive line position this past season. And your quarterback, you lost Michael Penix Jr. as well.
Right. The thing about this is that we don't know. We have a lot of assumptions about Zach Robinson's time in Atlanta, saying Kirk Cousins was not mobile enough, so they had to put him in the pistol. Michael Penix Jr. wasn't mobile enough. He didn't run a complicated system at Washington, so he had to be in the pistol. If you guys remember the game against the New England Patriots, and they started clapping on the line because that's the only way he could do a snap count. Those are all assumptions that Zach Robinson was hampered down by those things, and that when he comes to Tampa Bay, he won't be hampered down by any of that, and he'll be able to run the offense he truly wanted to the whole time. And that would be nice because he had some problems in Atlanta, but that's also just kind of what some people are guessing and talking about and speculating about. We don't know exactly what his offense is going to look like until he starts to run it in training camp and then into the season. So ideally, yes, you would want him to mix up his play calling a little better, use different formations. He used the pistol formation at a league high rate, and that kind of makes you predictable to a certain degree. Short yardage situations wasn't great. Top 10 in red zone defense because they were never able to get to the red zone basically last year, which is why they were a bottom team in scoring. So he's got some work to do, but he runs a very similar system to what we've seen in Tampa Bay before. And Baker Mayfield will definitely gel with that. The terminology will be similar. You can plug and play, and it's going to be up to him to make the necessary changes.
Yeah, I'm glad you took that route, River. I'm more so looking at, the comparison between the press conferences and everything. So we'll just remember, this is a lot of coach speak that goes on in these press conferences.
That's true.
That's true. Really what it is. They're going to say the right things that people want to hear. They're not going to say anything bad. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing when you go back to, post-game press conferences as well. And we used to harp on, we hear the same thing out of Baker Mayfield's mouth every single time. We hear the same thing out of Todd Bowles' mouth every single time. But that's part of it, right? They're giving the politically correct, if you will, answers during these, moments where they're in front of the media or wherever it may be. And behind the scenes, who knows what is going on? So it's probably going to look different than it did in Atlanta. How much different? Not sure until we get out there and we see what's going on in training camp and things of that nature. So wait and see moment. But again, guys, these guys and the coaches at the press conferences, players at the press conferences, don't try and, read too much into it unless you've got somebody just going off and they're just, kind of over giving the same old answer, which is few and far between here in Tampa Bay. So these guys, that's just kind of how they talk. They're going to do that. So who knows? We'll see. Training camp, we'll be there.
Yeah, he says here, he's saying, I lived in Atlanta for 8 years, pretty delusional fan base up there. I want to believe, boys. So you're up there in enemy territory, my man. You're hanging in there. But we appreciate you coming in here, commenting, bringing up some topics because these are good questions, man. These are good questions to discuss. And, during the offseason, February 4th, we are in dry season at the moment. We're getting ready for mock drafts. We're getting ready to overreact to NFL Combine, which I'm going to do 20 times over because I love the Combine. And I love the NFL draft. So it's just like time to overreact to everything. And that's what makes us a little bit more entertaining this offseason when it feels certainly dry. But we do have a Super Bowl coming up. But I want to go through a couple quick hitters before we wrap up. And two, if you have any questions, definitely about Maxx Crosby. If you have any there, or maybe some other free agents that you think you want us to discuss about, throw them in the comments, man. That's why we're here. But let's go through some quick hitters real quick. Let's talk about the Pro Bowl game last night. So I didn't get to view a ton of it. River, you were viewing all of it, I imagine. I think you did.
Yeah, I did. I did watch it. It's fun to see the guys.
What's it like? What's the difference? And I mean, I was there in Orlando 2 years ago, and got to speak with Baker and Tristan. So that was the best part for us, at least covering it. But the actual product, I regret traveling the next day to Orlando to watch it in person. It's rough. It's tough.
No, they're flying around out there. I don't know what you're talking about. It's fun. They have fun. I think there's a kind of joy in watching people get way too competitive about flag football. And that's kind of what ends up happening. But you have Micah Parsons try and come in at one point on his like, I guess, what would you call it? Not a wheelchair, like an electric scooter kind of. Yeah. And the ref said no, so boo. No, Antoine Winfield Jr. had the pretty crucial pick to help the NFC win their flag football game. Was awarded the defensive MVP of that game. So take away Tweez getting it done in San Francisco. So
something he didn't do a whole lot of this year. So
that's true. That's true. And they'll have to figure out kind of maybe get him closer to the football as opposed to babysitting, as Todd Bowles lovingly called it midway through the year. But yeah, he had a great time, which is cool. And it's fun. It's definitely not required viewing, but it's kind of cool sometimes to see all these players kind of in a more human element and a more relaxed element playing football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, congrats to Tweez for winning MVP, picking off Joe Burrow. Congrats on whoever participated in the Pro Bowl. All of one Buccaneer had his name mentioned on the night, and you kind of could see I mean, it's on a Tuesday night now. Like, I didn't even know they had moved it from like a Saturday or the Sunday before the Super Bowl onto a weekday. So I mean, that should just tell you enough about what's going on there with the Pro Bowl. We'll see with guys like Shedeur Sanders getting into the Pro Bowl if this is something that's going to be moving forward. But cool, Pro Bowl.
I think that's the most I heard about the Pro Bowl was Shedeur Sanders, and I'm not happy that he was making it.
He threw a pick, so.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
All right, guys, we do have a ton of questions, which is great. This is awesome. You guys are interacting with us. We appreciate it a ton. So let's start going through some of these real quick before we wrap up this show, and we'll talk about that Lightning game, which was phenomenal. But here we go. This is from Obtuse Angled here on YouTube asking, what do you guys think about adding Kyle Pitts, the Falcon star tight end? He was just with Zach Robinson this last year. Y'all's thoughts on this one with Kyle Pitts, because there is a conversation about tight end right now for the Buccaneers, and I don't think Otten, I don't know, is a pure tight end one for me. Just depending on what an offense wants to do, an offensive coordinator, but they could certainly use some help there, in my opinion.
The Bucs need a lot of help everywhere, so if you want to devote resources toward Kyle Pitts, that's something you have to think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you're going to go the free agent route, absolutely, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, Cade is a free agent in and of himself. He's kind of had his lapses this past year, but has always been a reliable target for Baker Mayfield, no matter what. I mean, he had a couple turnovers this year that were pretty bad, and a couple missed blocks that ended up in sacks that were pretty bad. So I don't know. I mean, you could probably bring Cade back on a pretty cheap deal to remain in Tampa is the thing when it comes down to the tight end position. But yeah, Kyle Pitts would make a ton of sense. I mean, he had his best season other than his rookie year in 2025 with Zach Robinson as the OC, and would be a solid pass catching guy. I'm not sure how he is blocking, probably pretty average if I had to guess, since he's so many times out there running routes for Atlanta. How are you going to be able to pull him away and not have him, be able to pay him more money than Atlanta is? I highly doubt that you're going to want to even do that. So I don't really think it'll happen, but it would be, a solid pickup there. You could also look, towards the trade market. for a guy like a TJ Hawkinson from Minnesota, who's kind of seen his production decline, and it's very similar to what Cade Otton has been able to put up the past couple of years in Tampa. He's dealt with injury issues of his own and hasn't really bounced back from his Pro Bowl days in Detroit with the Lions. But there's a couple options out there. I don't think tight end is necessarily a premium position in this offense. I think they can look towards their wide receivers for when it comes to Robinson and how he's going to scheme things up. But you're going to want at least an average guy. But I think your best bet is probably just to keep on, see what he's able to do in this offense. And then if you don't want to, move on from that after the next year or two, or however long you're able to get in here for a contract, get him in for a contract. So it'll be interesting, but I wouldn't be mad about Kyle Pitts being in a Bucs uniform.
It's a pretty stacked. I'm looking at it right now. It's a stacked tight end free agent market right here. So of course, that Travis Kelce's at the top there, but you got Njoku, Dallas Goedert with Philly. Hey, Taysom Hill, why not? Why not? You got Tyler Higbee from the Rams. We were just talking about Kyle Pitts. Shoot, even Darren Waller down there, who out of nowhere just exploded for the Miami Dolphins.
You're telling me his rap career didn't work out?
I'm just telling you, man.
He actually played well, though. So.
I'm telling you, Darren Waller was an absolute stud. I would say that he was Tua's best target outside of Waddle. I mean, he was an absolute beast for the Dolphins. And just exploded out of nowhere for them. But he still got it. What is his age? Yeah, 33. That's getting up there for sure. But yeah, some older guys in here. Your youngest one, though, David Njoku, that 29 years old, but his market value is pretty high. But yeah, it's an interesting tight end room, and then that's the tight end free agent market, or like you just said, making potential trades, all that kind of stuff. Like there could be something there for the Bucs. This is a question here asking. Do you guys see what Stephen A. Smith said about Penix? More and more is coming out of his bad knees and past injuries. So I think a lot of that's been kind of covered.
I was about to say, I don't think it's a trade secret necessarily. Yeah. So he's had a lot of injuries to his ACLs, to his shoulders. He suffered a lot of season-ending injuries there over the course of his career, and he came into the league pretty beat up, and now he's even more so. So they're going to do something about that.
Yeah, and we'll see with that. It's kind of what it is. I don't have much more to say on it and expound on it than River had to say. It's is what it is. That's kind of what he's been dealing with his whole entire career. You've got the wheelchair photo of both knees wrapped up. That's been passed around social media and the internet for years now, since his time back in college. So that is what it is when it's Michael Penix. We'll see if he's able to bounce back there for Atlanta, but they've got a huge quarterback problem going on over there.
They do.
We got another one here from T-Town 813 asking, so what do the Raiders want for Maxx Crosby? A 1 at 15 and player. What package do they exactly want?
I'd probably take a little more than that. Probably a first and a second if I had to guess. Parsons went for 2 firsts and Kenny Clark. Of course, Parsons is 26, Crosby is 29. Crosby is still very productive, so it would definitely take at least a first-round pick to get done. Probably a second as well, and then maybe something else, depending on how stringent they are. So it would cost a lot.
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I was going to say, first and second, and then maybe a 5th rounder, maybe even, you go first, third, Chris Godwin. I know a lot of Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans aren't going to love to hear that, but you might have to include a player here, and wide receiver is one of your most expendable, units on this team that you can kind of move some guys if you have to. So that's kind of what you're looking at, first, second, and maybe a 5th, or like a first and a third, and a player such as Chris Godwin.
Hey, look, they can just have Braswell. How about that? Like pretty
I don't know if they're going to swing for that one.
I don't think there's very much value. Not very much value.
You never know. You never know.
You never know. Maybe they see something. Maybe the Raiders see something in Braswell that we're not seeing. Here's Obtuse asking another question here on YouTube. Is Dean automatically gone in free agency? If so, could you guys see a cornerback taken in round 1?
It is to my understanding that Jamel Dean really likes it in Tampa Bay. So moving away would be kind of a pain, as it always is, and that would factor into that decision. He did take a pay cut this offseason, and he did play himself out of it. He played very well, and that rose his monetary value quite a bit. Still had that injury problem that he had showcased the entire time he's been in Tampa Bay. And with that in mind, they're going to have to decide whether or not they want to do that, whether they want to pay a premium value to keep him. So I thought he played very well, but his injury status is still a huge question, and it still caused problems. So some decisions to make. I think it's definitely a possibility that Dean comes back, maybe more so than some other people think. But he did play himself out of a smaller deal, I think, this year. He played a little too well for the pay cut he took.
Yeah, he obviously wants to be here, else he probably wouldn't have taken that pay cut in the middle of the season like he did. And then again, he played himself out of it, and he's going to be warranted, a bit more money this offseason, depending on what kind of restructures the Buccaneers do. Yeah, you could definitely see Dean being back in the red and pewter, but you could also see him headed elsewhere. If you remember a couple years ago, they decided to stick with Dean over Carlton Davis, who is now in his second Super Bowl. So, some of those things happen as well. Where you kind of could have taken a guess at the wrong guy, but Dean's played extremely well ever since that anyways, so it's not necessarily on those two guys or one or the other. But if Dean does go, you could absolutely see the Bucs take a corner in round one, kind of keep that cohesiveness going with getting younger in the secondary. Zion McCollum, still young guy, just signed his first contract after his rookie. You can build off of the Benjamin Morrison pick as well as the Jacob Parrish pick, just a year removed from them. Grab another young guy here in the first round. A guy I wrote about recently over on BucsGameday.com is Brandon Cisse, a guy that played cornerback at South Carolina, I believe, and then before that, maybe at Louisville or NC State. But kind of one of those lengthy lockdown corners who played very aggressive ball. Cisse is more of a guy who's better in man, but he can also play in, kind of a zone system with Todd Bowles and be able to attack in that sort of fashion. So if you guys haven't read that, go check it out on BucsGameday.com. Got a little piece up on him, as well as another second round mock pick, which is a linebacker that you guys would thoroughly enjoy.
There you go. I'm going to say over under on Carlton Davis getting injured in the Super Bowl.
I mean, he's been fairly healthy this year. I mean,
he's been up and down. He's been up and down. I've had to sadly watch a lot of Patriots games just because I thought my Steelers, would make a run, maybe, in dreams. But, Carlton still goes down quite a bit. He'll come back in games, though, which is good. But Jamel, I thought, had a good season. And, he dealt with a little bit of injuries this year. But he made a focus. He was telling us in training camp, he has to be healthy. That's something Bowles told him. You have to stay healthy. And he did that for the most part. So, real quick, though, before we wrap this up, man, I know y'all checked it out, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners did, but that Lightning game in Raymond James Stadium against the Bruins, I somehow, within, the last 16 hours or somehow, got into that stadium with a ticket, and it was an absolute insane experience. I've never seen Raymond James that sold out except for driving by a Taylor Swift concert there and being I can't drive anywhere. I could barely get around that stadium, but it was slammed with Lightning fans, and the Bruins traveled well for the most part, but heavy Lightning Bolts fans, and it was crazy, the tailgating experience, and then just getting in there and just seeing a hockey rink down there and it actually being ice down there, and then seeing the team come in with the creamsicle uniforms and Tristan Wirfs having the speaker system going, Jacob Mayfield amping up everybody, and then pregame, and I'm sure just an overall incredible experience, just the atmosphere. But then when you go into the game itself, you score within 11 seconds, you're like, what the heck is going on, man? The Bolts are just going to rout these guys, and then out of nowhere, you go down 5-1, and you have a franchise record of your biggest comeback with a win. And
somebody can win in those creamsicle uniforms.
Dude, I know.
1-0. Hey,
dude, I know someone. Maybe that breaks the curse. I was just thinking on that. Did that break the curse, the creamsicle curse?
Yeah, it did.
It had to have done it, right?
We can book it. We can book it. Yeah.
It was so funny watching those. It was so funny watching those hockey players dressed up in those things entering the stadium in the full uniforms. Dude.
They're more fit than big. They're more fit than big.
Outside of Victor Hedman and Andre Vasilevsky, everybody else just looked like kickers and punters walking into the stadium, dude. It was awesome. But I mean, Logan, you being there, that's probably an awesome experience. I moved at the wrong time up to the Northeast to go ahead and miss that. 39 degrees at puck drop is just crazy in Tampa, but for as good as the experience was for you guys down there, Watching it at home was just as thrilling, man. It was fantastic. The theatrics that were going on before the game with, the plundering pirates and just the crazy things that were just happening all over the place, and the map that was, around the rink, the guys being walked in by Baker Mayfield and Tristan Wirfs, and them two hanging out. You got Tim McGraw there saying, I just love to watch, these guys beat the absolute shit out of each other. And, everything was just awesome from that standpoint. And it was the most viewed NHL game this season. So obviously hockey is growing in the state of Florida, and the relationship between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is undefeated. So awesome to see those two work, hand in hand with one another to be able to get this done. But, hopefully that happens again, and I'll be able to make my way down there for it.
No, yeah, it was a surreal experience, and then seeing Vaz go in a goalie fight. You get a goalie fight surrounded with 60,000+ people. Like, come on, dog! Like
the crowd pop on that was awesome on TV.
Oh, it was incredible.
The crowd
it felt
pop
like a WWE, like a WWE match pop. Like that was just how it was. And then to have the shootout at the very end and Vaz making the block there to win it. I mean,
it's a great game to watch.
You couldn't ask for anything better. And that front office, the organization from the Lightning, they just know how to do it, man. They know how to please their fans. And Amalie Arena sells out. What are they, like on a 450th Street game or whatever it is? I don't know. It's like insane. Because I was just there on Thursday night. I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to the outdoor game. That is a pricey ticket, but I'll go to Thursday night, the $35 one. And it was slammed there. It was sold out, but you also have Gatsby weekend, of course, so that helped mesh in everything. It was just a really fun weekend down here, even with the cold. The Tampa Bay Bucs fans, Lightning fans, everybody involved, the Rays fans. I got a big Rays season coming up here, back down the road here in St. Pete at the Trop. So, some good times in Tampa. But maybe what could cap it off is a Maxx Crosby trade to the Buccaneers.
There we go.
Maybe.
I think that those jerseys would fly off the roof. Just don't get them from Fanatics because they're going to be made like $10. So don't do that. Don't do that. But that's going to do it for us. We appreciate obtuse angle to saying here on YouTube. Hit that like button. It helps.
Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. We have over 200 people with us on this beautiful Wednesday here down here in Tampa Bay. And then also too, if you're new here or you haven't yet, consider hitting that subscribe button. We're seeing some big growth over there as well with our subscribers. It's free to do, and to hit the bell next to that in case we do go live for any kind of breaking news. It will ring your phone, give you notification, so then you can come tune in, join us, drop in some questions and topics. But that's going to do it for us. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all's week. And if we don't talk to you guys before the end of the week, we'll talk to you guys next week on Here Are the Cannons. We're out of here. Peace.
All right, the Cannons.